The Viterbo Province forms part of a vast area called Tuscia Laziale, to the north of Rome, between the river Tiber and the Tyrrhenian Sea. Covering an area of 3,612 square kilometers, most of the Viterbo Province stands on the site of major volcanic eruptions, between 1 million and 300,000 years ago. The Vulsino area, centered on the large Lake of Bulsana, the Vicano area, with the Vico Lake at its center, and the Cimino area to the southeast of Viterbo. Before we look at the water resources in the Viterbo province, let's see what is meant by the water cycle. The volume of water in the hydrosphere, which includes all the water present on the planet, is estimated at about 1,400 billion cubic kilometers. Fresh water represents about 3% of terrestrial water. Of this, only 0.01% forms part of the surface fresh water, which accumulates in lakes, wetlands and rivers. If we subtract about half, the water held by large lakes, only a very small proportion is available for human activities. Human consumption represents a drop in the ocean of the total amount of terrestrial water. But the way we use this drop is extremely important, because we often extract it in the pure form and return it laden with pollutants. So how does the water cycle work? Starting with the sea. The sun heats up the water, some of which evaporates into the air. At the same time, water evaporates on land, forming vapor in the air. The ascending air currents carry the water vapor into the atmosphere, where, due to the lower temperature, it condenses into microscopic droplets, forming the clouds. The clouds are moved by winds, and the water particles in the clouds coalesce and grow in size until they precipitate. Some of the water, in the form of snow, accumulates at the polar ice caps and in glaciers. During the warmer seasons, the snow melts and the water flows off as streams. The precipitation falls back into the sea and onto the land, where, under the force of gravity, it forms rivers flowing towards the sea, while part of it accumulates as fresh water in lakes and rivers. Another part filters into the soil to form aquifers, or water-bearing strata, which store vast quantities of fresh water underground for long periods. Part of the underground water is near the surface and filters back into rivers, lakes and the sea. Another part comes to the surface in the form of freshwater springs. Sooner or later, this mass of water eventually finds its way back to the sea, where the cycle begins again. Now let's have a look at the main surface water resources in the Viterbo province. There are two major categories of watercourses in this area, those that make up the river Tiber basin and those that flow directly into the Tyrrhenian Sea along the coast of the Viterbo province. The river Flora runs for 80 kilometers, marking the border between the Lazio and Tuscany regions, before flowing into the Tyrrhenian Sea in the area of Montalto di Castro. The section that runs through the area called Castellaccio di Vulci is certainly the most interesting from the naturalistic point of view. Here the river runs through deep limestone and tufa ravines in an area which is thinly populated and where the main activity is agriculture. On this section, the Vulci Nature Reserve was set up in 1982 by the World Wildlife Fund around an artificial lake created by the electricity company Enel a century ago. This wetland area consists of woods and fields frequented by a variety of sedentary and migratory birds. the river Flora runs into a small waterfall, forming the beautiful Pellicone Lake, which can be reached on foot along a path which starts in the nearby Vulci Nature Reserve and Archaeology Park. One of the main tributaries is the stream called Fosso Olpeta, running from the Lake of Midzano. The basin of the river Marta covers a large part of the Viterbo Province. The river Marta starts from the Lake of Bulsana and initially runs through an area that is mainly agricultural. It is 70 kilometers long and cuts through the middle of the Tuscania Nature Reserve. The river Mignone rises in the area of Veiano at an altitude of 400 meters above sea level. It is 59 kilometers long and runs mostly through the Viterbo Province and partly through the Rome Province, flowing into the Tyrrhenian Sea near Tarquinia. The path taken by the river also includes two of the main attractions in the Viterbo Province: the Monterano Nature Reserves and the Tarquinia Salt Marshes. The River Tiber is the longest river in Italy, running through 14 provinces in 6 regions. The River Paglia, one of the Tiber's tributaries, rises in the Siena province and flows into Lazio near Acquapendenti, a mainly agricultural area. The area also includes the Monte Rufeno Regional Nature Reserve, where the watercourses are unpolluted and almost entirely pure. High-quality water of the Stridoloni tributary makes it one of the few rivers suitable for salmon breeding in the province. On the border with the Rome province, the River Tiber also includes the smaller River Treia, which is 36 kilometers long and flows into the Tiber near Civita Castellana, through countryside that is typically Etruscan, dominated by ravines and rock faces. The Lake of Bulsana, set in Europe's largest volcanic crater, is one of Italy's most important natural assets. The Vulsinio area includes 3 extinct volcano craters, dating from different geological periods: Bolsena, Monte Fiascone, and Latera. Towards the end of the volcanic period, 2 islands, now known as Bisentina and Martana, emerged as a result of underwater eruptions in the southern part of Lake Bulsana. Both are of volcanic origin and semicircular in shape, due to partial collapse of the rock. Covering an area of 114 square kilometers, Bolsano is the largest volcanic lake in Europe. It is situated at 304 meters above sea level and has a maximum depth of 151 meters. Lake of Bulsana and its shores are characterized by a wide variety of animal and bird life, and the oxygen-rich water is ideally suited to many types of fish. Since it is a small, slow-flowing river, the renewal of the water in the lake takes a long time, estimated at about 120 years. The Lake of Vico in the Monte Cimino area occupies the crater of another extinct volcano. Its characteristic horseshoe shape is due to the peak of Monte Venere, which formed inside the crater during the last eruption phase. The lake covers an area of 12 square kilometers with a maximum depth of 48 meters. Lake Vico is situated at 510 meters above sea level, making it the highest of all the large lakes in Italy. As in most temperate areas, the water in Lake Vico is subject to thermal stratification. This means that during summer, the surface temperature is considerably higher than the deeper layers of water. The main activities in the area around the lake are intensive agriculture and fishing. At present, 2/3 of the lake area forms part of the Lake Vico Nature Reserve set up in 1982. An interesting feature of the nature reserve is the beechwood on Monte Venere, at about 530 meters above sea level. This type of tree normally grows at a much lower altitude in the Apennine Mountains range, running through central Italy. The lake is particularly rich in bird and animal life. Several species migrate here to spend the winter. In recent years, the water level in the lake has gone down considerably, and this could lead to marked changes in the fish and plant life. The Lake of Midzano occupies a small volcanic crater in the Vulcini Hills at 452 meters above sea level. It covers an area of just half a square kilometer with a diameter of 800 meters and a depth of 31 meters. The Latin name for the lake, Lacus Stationensis, described by Roman chroniclers Seneca and Pliny, derives from the ancient settlement of Statonia, which stood on its shores, destroyed by the Vandals in the early Middle Ages. The lake is one of the most interesting and evocative places in the whole Viterbo Province. The shores are almost completely surrounded by steep, green-clad hills. Only to the northeast is there a lower part where a tributary flows, the river Olpeta, which enters the crater and then joins the river Flora. The Lake of Monte Rosi is situated in the Sabatino volcanic area at 276 meters above sea level. Occupying a small circular crater, it is surrounded by woods, fields and grassland. With a diameter of 600 meters and a circumference of 2 kilometers, it covers about 1/3 of a square kilometer, with an average depth of around 7 meters. Particularly interesting in terms of geological and natural features, the lake is much visited by migrating marsh birds. It is also home to many aquatic plants, which thrive in the relatively shallow water. As is always the case, one of the main activities of the population living around the lake is fishing. This is always true of the Viterbo province, since several finds around the Lake of Bulsana and Vico show that people have been fishing here since prehistoric times. All fishing activities are governed by Regional Law number 87 of 1990. Every year by June, the Provincial Commission draws up the plan for fishing in the lakes and rivers of the province for the coming year. In recent years, the Viterbo Province has been carrying out repopulation projects to increase the number of fish in the main watercourses. To this end, the Bulsana and Mette municipalities have incubators where fish are hatched, for example, corregone and pike. Besides these two species, the number of eels in the Bulsana lake is being increased. Regulating the fish population in the Vico lake is entrusted to private citizens with exclusive fishing rights, who regularly boost the numbers of fish in order to offset the negative effects of human activities and environmental changes. Regarding the main rivers in the province, the plans envisage increasing other types of fish, including trout and carp. The Viterbo Province regulates other activities on watercourses by means of regulations for safe navigation on inland waterways. In particular, on the Bulsana Lake, navigation is restricted depending on the length of the vessels, the speed allowed, protected areas and time periods. On the lakes of Midzano, Monterosi and Vico, all navigation is forbidden, except for boats used by working fishermen. Special regulations apply to rights of way and other obligations for safe navigation, underwater activities, water sports, swimming, boat hiring, various types of buoys to mark channels, etc. As of January the 1st, 2008, the use of water bikes and water scooters is forbidden everywhere. One of the main activities in the Viterbo province is agriculture. Reduced rainfall in recent years has led farmers to make increasing use of water taken directly from lakes and rivers or from underground sources by means of wells. At the end of 2007, the Viterbo provincial authorities had definite notice of about 4,700 wells properly registered, of which 2,900 for domestic use, while the remaining 1,800 were used for irrigation, industrial purposes and fish breeding. The Tyrrhenian coast in the Viterbo province extends for about 55 kilometers, of which 75% is used for swimming and water sports, while the rest is in its natural state. Evident signs of pollution are beginning to appear along the coastline, threatening swimming and water sports, especially around river estuaries. It is essential to take immediate action to remove the causes and create areas for conserving the natural habitat and the species living there. This is what has been done, for example, at the nature reserve called Saline di Tarquinia salt marshes, an area which is particularly interesting as a point of contact between the land and the sea. Covering about 170 hectares along the coast, the reserve has been classified by the European Union as an important area for special protection. There are no less than 17 migratory species that come to the marshes to spend the winter. Tourism in the Viterbo Province is closely linked to the lakes and coastline. The number of tourists who choose to spend their holidays in the towns and villages around Lake Bulsana and Lake Vico is growing year by year, and they divide their time between the lakes and visiting the extraordinary natural landscape and archaeological features. Many seaside resorts along the coast, such as Tarquinia and Marina di Montalto di Castro, with wide beaches and several modern hotels and restaurants. Viterbo's hydrothermal basin is one of the largest in Italy. The springs of Bagnaccio and Bullicame were known about in Etruscan times. The various pools are located in the open countryside, and the temperature of the water enables them to be used for bathing even in wintertime. The water of the Bullicame springs flows to the surface at a temperature of 58 degrees centigrade and has always been famous for its therapeutic properties, especially for treating chronic respiratory disorders and osteoarthritis, as well as skin disease. Alongside the thermal spas and the wellness centres, there are other pools which can be used freely. Protecting the quality of surface water involves checking the effluents which are discharged into the watercourses. There are more than 200 industrial sites in the area, as well as many livestock farms. The proportion of the population served by urban water purifying plants is about 81%, in line with the regional situation. Over the last 60 years, the population of the area has doubled, while water consumption has increased fourfold. The availability of clean drinking water is a serious emergency in many parts of the world. Every day something like 30,000 people die through lack of water or polluted water. Our wasteful and careless use of water makes us forget how important it is to protect this natural resource, which is often considered inexhaustible, but which is not. To understand how important the subject is, consider these facts. 31 countries with an overall population of more than 1 billion people do not have sufficient drinking water. It is estimated that by 2020, about 3 billion people will be affected by this lack of a vital resource. The average water consumption in African countries varies between 12 and 50 litres a day per person. In Europe, between 170 and 250 litres a day per person. In the United States, almost 700 litres. To provide drinking water for everyone in the world, the amount of money required would be equivalent to what is spent annually in Europe on ice cream and in the USA on cosmetics. In Italy, about 60% of water consumption is absorbed by agriculture, 25% by industry, and 15% for domestic and civil use. Out of the 250 litres a day that every Italian uses for domestic purposes, only a small part is used for direct consumption, for cooking and personal hygiene. The rest is used for other non-essential purposes or is wasted through carelessness. In northern Italy, 80% of the available water is used. In central Italy, about 50%, while in southern Italy and the islands, 100% is used. Most drinking water comes from underground sources by means of wells. In recent years, increased extraction of underground water, combined with pollution, has caused shortages, which could lead to a crisis situation. The fact that the water distribution network in Italy is old and leaky means that almost half the water pumped into the pipes is lost through dispersion. For this reason, Italy is bottom of the table in Europe for managing water resources. Therefore, urgent steps are required to achieve sustainable management of water resources in all sectors. Otherwise, we run the risk of serious shortages in the near future. In the Viterbo Province too, it is no longer possible to put off conservation and protection measures. Although several projects for water conservation have been started, there are many others that need to be planned and implemented. Otherwise, the fishing sector, which is so important as an economic and food resource, could be seriously harmed. Conservation of coastal areas and the animal species that live there could be threatened through lack of regulations governing the use of bathing and resort areas by tourists. The use of water for agricultural purposes, if not strictly regulated, could lead to shortages of drinking water for domestic use by the local population. Our tour has enabled us to see pristine areas, still unpolluted, which must remain as they are for future generations. Young people who watch this video will be responsible for safeguarding and conserving the places we have seen. They are the heirs to our environmental and cultural heritage, which includes a vital resource, water, the source of life, without which there would be no future.